Hello and welcome to our Veronica Mars review. I'm Paul.
And I'm Dave.
And this week we are discussing the episode Lord of the Bling. So this episode originally aired February 8th, 2005, about a month after the last episode, Clash of the Tritons.
Mhm.
Alrighty, so let us start off with the number one song in America this week, Dave.
Let's see. Yeah, it's been some time, so not sure if I could fall back on the case of last week's particular song still being up on top.
It is still Let Me Love You by Mario. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, just all the club songs in the early 2000s.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Alrighty, so number one film in America. Any guesses?
Let's see.
I'll give you a hint. Not seasonally appropriate.
For
No,
February?
no,
It was-
definitely not.
So again, not a specific Oscar winner or any sort of thing like that.
No,
Interesting.
definitely not.
Uh, Nothing is immediately jumping to mind. Uh, and I thought I had sort of a place of what sort of things were releasing around in that year, but it's fuzzy with all the other things.
So it was a movie called Boogeyman. It is not good.
On the one hand, I can supposedly understand, but it's also a mild case of, dear God, there's a majority of particular horror movies that take that particular concept and or work with that particular sort of idea, so I have no idea which film you're talking about.
Um, it did get two sequels that I think were like direct to DVD kind of thing, but yeah, it wasn't good, and it didn't really make an impact. The best thing it had going for it was its poster.
Okay, I could somewhat see that. Gen- eh, Generic, but still fairly works for the particular uh, genre that it sort of fits in.
It does, yes. So let us move on to video games because my God, were there some bangers while we were away.
Yeah.
So the last time we spoke, we discussed up to January 11th. So since then, on January 12th, if you had a Game Boy Advance, you could pick up Banjo Pilot.
Yeah. Check out the fancy supposed kart racing, the sorts of stuff from there.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I doubt it was any good. January
Yeah.
16th, if you had a PC, PS2, or Xbox, you could pick up The Punisher.
Because everyone knows the Punisher. He's an amazing from the comics he's in.
Yes, this game is remembered solely because of the like fatality things you could do, and for nothing else.
Yeah. But then, of course, it also falls into the place of there's a couple of PlayStation 2 games and other particular ones that have those particular fatalities in them.
Yes, I will give it credit. It did have some cool like environmental ways to kill people, but it wasn't enough to sustain a full game.
Yeah, what can you do, I suppose?
January 18th, if you had a PS2, you could pick up Full Metal Alchemist and The Broken Angel.
Ah, yes, one I am decently familiar with.
Okay, I basically know nothing about Full Metal Alchemist. I think I've been forced to watch maybe a few episodes, but I don't really know anything about it.
Yeah, it's one of the cases of popular anime gets video game adaptations, and especially on the whole with this particular one, it was definitely good, though it was the case of I played the sequel first before playing this one, and it was a case of it's a little bit clunkier than the sequel to it.
Ah. Also on January 18th, if you had a PC, you could pick up Street Racing Syndicate.
Because everyone loves the street racing.
Yes, well, this is like around the time of like Need for Speed Underground 2 and stuff, so it makes sense.
It's definitely true.
Also on January 18th, if you had a PS2, you could pick up Virtua Quest.
Oh dear God, the nostalgia bomb in my case.
I don't think I've ever played this, but I know the cover super well.
Well, most likely it's the case if you either saw it on store shelves or you saw it within my collection, but it's kind of the marvelous case of what exactly do you do when you don't have too much within your base concept of the video game series that you have, and then what to do with it when it's kind of been sleeping for a particular time. Because this game is a fighting series.
Oh, it's a spin-off of Virtua Fighter.
Yes. It takes more of the RPG platformer aspects and takes the characters from the fighting games and uses their techniques for combat within the game.
Huh. That's interesting. Continuing along, January 18th, if you had a Nintendo DS, you could pick up Zookeeper.
Eh, not surprising, but kind of the case of probably saw it. It's just like, not interested.
Yeah, it's one of those terrible, like, tile matching puzzle games that came out. There were like a million of them on the DS. January 19th, if you had a GameCube, you could pick up Virtua Quest. For some reason, it released a day later on GameCube.
Man, GameCube always having a wait a day. My goodness.
January 25th, if you had an Xbox, you could pick up Oddworld Stranger's Wrath.
Yes, another marvelous case of, man, this series is incredibly interesting, but around the time when it first sort of came out, God, was it strange.
I think it's always been strange.
Yeah.
January 25th, if you had a PC, PS2, or Xbox, you could pick up Playboy the Mansion.
Because that was a thing for video gamers around that time.
Yes, the game where you have to play as Hugh Hefner and make the magazine and have parties, and I don't know what else you do in the game.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Kind of an interesting time.
so the thing I've heard about this game is that it's, from a technical standpoint, it's not poorly made. The problem is the playboyness of it.
Yeah. Kind of the case of it had the money and finances to have decent uh, graphical gameplay and other sorts of things to it, but it's also kind of the case of Playboy game. What can you do with it?
Yeah, like, it looks like it was made by, like, a pretty decent studio that had, like, made other stuff. Like, maybe not super well-known stuff, but they had, like, done some stuff, and it seemed like they were competent, but they got stuck making a Playboy game, and they made the best they could out of it.
Yeah. Kind of the cases of you need to pay the bills somehow, I'm sure, and they came in with a good stack of money.
January 27th, if you had a PC, you could play Cops 2170, The Power of Law.
Understandable, but still a mild case of, God, there's not many cop games kind of out nowadays.
Not specifically cops. There is there is Police Simulator, which is quite good.
Yeah, I suppose.
February 4th, if you were playing on a Linux-based system, so
Because those things existed.
for 3 people, Postal 2: Share the Pain.
Yeah. Yeah.
The sequel to Postal. Good thing that series was never controversial. Anyway, February 8th, the day this episode airs, we've got a couple of games here. So we've got Racing Gears Advance on the Game Boy Advance.
More racing games on handheld systems.
Yeah. We've got on the PS2, Shadow of Rome, which is a game that I know the cover of, but I've never played.
I have vague memory of it, and or I get it confused with the 372 other similar games of its ilk. But nevertheless, it was fairly common at the time, I believe.
So if you had a Game Boy Advance, you could pick up Shaman King Legacy of Spirits Soaring Hawk or Shaman King Legacy of Spirits Sprinting Wolf. So apparently they were doing the Pokemon thing of releasing 2 games on the same day.
Because if you're worried about your game selling well, just make it two games and make it so you have to connect between the both of them to up your sales, supposedly. Follow the Pokemon method.
But like, maybe I'm wrong, but Shaman King I don't feel like was a big thing in North America at the time.
Yeah. One of the particular things is there was so many series at the particular time that was coming over that specific popularity of certain series in Japan didn't exactly translate super well to certain series when they jumped over. And even then, the popularity can only be so high in certain cases.
Alrighty, continuing on, if you had a GameCube, PS2, or Game Boy Advance, you could pick up Winnie the Pooh's Rumbly Tumbly Adventure.
Because of course you can. Because if there wasn't any sort of Winnie Pooh game, any sort of place in the world, then what is this world coming to?
Exactly. We need more Winnie the Pooh games, I think. And finally, the big release for this particular day. If you were a PC gamer, you could go to the store or on Steam and pick up this little game called Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2: The Sith Lords.
Yes. Now, sadly, my bias is showing because I have not gotten into any of the Star Wars games, and I don't have too much experience with this one either.
No! Okay, out of all the Star Wars games that exist, I'll say you really only have to play Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2.
No, understandable since I have vague recollection of when most of the big Star Wars games have been re-released over the last year-ish or so. So, yeah, heard about them, just never caught on my radar.
I think you would like these two particular games because they're very much like an action RPG kind of thing. They're like a Skyrim kind of thing.
That is definitely true. It would be interesting.
Yes, they're quite good. So moving on to the episode. Okay. Oh yes. So we see a man who we come to know as Percy Bone Hamilton relaxing by his pool, who is played by Anthony Anderson, and that made me very happy.
Yeah, it was interesting to see.
Yes. Soon his son Bryce approaches and says that Yolanda, Bryce's sister and Bone's daughter, has disappeared. Later, Bone enters Mars' investigation and looks for Keith. Wallace tells Veronica that Bone is a criminal and gangster rap record company owner. Veronica says that she used to be friends with Yolanda. Keith eventually decides to take on the case, and Bone has a list of people whom Keith should talk to because of rifts between Bone and them. And that list is just Southern California. If you hear anything about New York or Detroit or I think the other one was Vegas, you should give him a call because he has other lists.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes. Later, Veronica offers to gather information about Yolanda, which Keith accepts. In a flashback, Veronica helps Yolanda find her English class. Keith visits the first person on Bone's list, Sam Bloom. Veronica talks to Yolanda's friend, Gabrielle, and she finds out that the two of them were at a club on the night of her disappearance. Keith is going to investigate Marcel, the club bouncer, who is another one of the enemies on Bone's list. Veronica is eventually allowed to come on the condition that she stays in the car. Also, Keith has a back injury that he refuses to treat because he's a stubborn bastard. Keith talks to Marcel, who recommends that he talk to Dimebag, number 2 on the enemies list. However, they don't find Dimebag there. Keith sneaks his way into Dimebag's apartment in disguise as a mechanic while Veronica waits outside. While Keith is in the room, Dimebag and his posse appear, and Veronica pretends to be a hotel worker. Keith bugs the suspects' rooms, and they begin to hear the conversation. Meanwhile, Logan and Aaron get ready for Lynn's funeral and have a fight in front of the paparazzi. Veronica visits Yolanda's younger brother, who thinks that she may have been kidnapped, not simply disappeared. In another flashback, Veronica sees Yolanda kissing Logan and tells Lily about it. Lily says that they must stop being friends with her. Bone calls Dimebag and he says that he knows where Yolanda is. However, it is later revealed through the hidden camera that they are not hiding Yolanda. Veronica and Wallace find out that Sam Bloom has a son, Benjamin, who is with Yolanda at the club on the night of her disappearance. When Logan sits in his room and plays video games during Lynn's funeral, Duncan talks to him, and Logan expresses his belief that his mother is not dead, but simply escaped. Veronica calls Benjamin's roommate under her disguise, and he says that Benjamin left alone for Las Vegas, which means that Sam was lying about his whereabouts. In another flashback, Veronica abandons Yolanda for Lily. Bone comes to Keith with a ransom note for $500,000. However, the drop location is already specified, and the area is under heavy surveillance. Bone believes that Dimebag is the kidnapper. During the drop, Bone places his pinky ring inside of a plastic football and shoves it down the drain per the kidnapper's orders. However, it turns out that Yolanda's brother was behind the whole scheme and intercepts the plastic football at the beach. It turns out that Bryce actually planned the whole scheme, and that the entire plot was to stop Yolanda from running away. Keith, Veronica, and Bryce talk to Bone and his wife. The three get Yolanda on a Skype-like call. She says that she has run off to marry Benjamin Bloom. Yolanda says that she won't come back until Bone's feud with Sam Bloom is over. Later, Veronica calls Yolanda again and apologizes for leaving, which she accepts. So that is this episode. What did you think, Mr. David?
It's always interesting with particular episodes when they tie in a whole lot of the stuff between the main character and either the victim or other certain things within the story in certain sort of ways. And it was interesting to see a lot of the stuff play out, because of being somewhat attentive within the episode or hearing sort of the things. It's good for dropping all the particular sorts of clues for seeing how things sometimes are going to go. And it was nice enough to sort of follow along, see how things sort of went on within this episode, as well as dropping hints about other particular things that will supposedly be worked on within it. But again, we'll have to wait and see how the next couple episodes pan out with that. Again, with seeing Anthony Anderson within this particular role was nice to see. Another familiar actor faces and those sorts of things from that. I think on whole, it was also really nice to see the dynamics with Veronica working with Keith, doing investigation and seeing points that to sort of work on. Keith having his methods, but Veronica being on standby for spotting additional information or helping out if things are going to supposedly go wrong.
Yes, I do. I always enjoy when they have episodes where Keith and Veronica work together, because they have a very good chemistry on screen. Alrighty, so a couple of things that are important in this episode, just to keep in mind. We find out that it was Yolanda who kissed Logan, leading to Lily and Logan's breakup before the murder, which that might be important later.
Yeah, that's definitely a point.
And at the end of the episode, Logan asks Veronica for help in finding his mother, which is obviously going to be an important thing over the next couple of episodes at the very least.
Yeah, most definitely, since he has it within his head that she is still around because of particular things that were done. I believe it was a Pacific lighter that she carries around with her was left on the dining room table before she left. So just the case of, was that something?
Yeah, so
off from there?
Logan tells this story about how his grandfather was in, I think it was in Vietnam or Korea. I don't remember which conflict it was. But him and his buddies all got out, and they got lighters that there was some inscription on them. And his mother always carried that lighter, but the day that she disappeared, she left it on either a table or something, which she had always carried it in her purse. So he's like, well, that proves that she escaped. And it's like, well, no, she could have just forgot the lighter. But anyway, there's one kind of interesting thing. So did you notice what game Logan was playing at the funeral?
Oh my gosh, yes. It was the case of he was playing through the first Fable game on the Xbox.
Yes. Maybe that's a subtle hint.
I wouldn't be surprised. Though it was a mild case of the action sound effects were not exactly lined up to the actual gameplay of the game. So, is it really much of a crime to have the gameplay sounding in the um, show as it plays their writers and whatnot? But yeah, whatever.
I think it's a copyright issue. So, because if you ever notice when a lot of shows have like video games on screen, they'll show the game, but they always change the sound effects. And I think there's a copyright issue because like that's considered music and it's copyrighted differently.
Um, yeah, that's true.
So, if there's nothing else about this episode, next week we'll be discussing Mars versus Mars. Alrighty. So in this episode, we're going to have Veronica and her father Keith take opposing sides when Veronica's history teacher, Mr. Rooks, is accused of sexually assaulting a student.
Oh boy.
Yes. Oh, also, we're going to get another appearance of Abel Koontz.
Hmm.
Yes. So there will be some things happening next week. But until then, I'm Paul.
And I'm Dave.